Hola, hello, hi, bienvenido, and welcome back or welcome to Entrepreneurial Thinkers, the show where every week I get to talk to the best and brightest entrepreneurial thinkers across every segment of society and industry today. And today, although no different, it is a little bit different. We're going to do something special today. And this is really just a show for you. This isn't going to be out on the public airwaves. We are creating this for whomever has the link and listens to this. So if you've received this video link, you're someone in my community, you're in my circles who I value a great deal. You're someone who I am inviting to invest in me and to share in the success of our podcast and our other media ventures over the next 10 years. To help us create this special Q&A show that we're about to do, we've invited our lead investor, my friend, my partner in this adventure, and a former guest alumnus of the Entrepreneurial Thinkers show, Will Stringer. And we'll flip the roles, and I'm going to let Will interview me. So Will, let me tell you a little bit about him in case you don't know who he is. Will is the founder, and managing partner at Chisos Capital, as well as the co-founder at the investment platform company Inspire, which he can tell us more about if he wants to. But welcome, Will, buddy. It's great to share the mic with you today, kind of turn the tables over to you and turn this show over to you for this special conversation that we want to have for our friends and prospective investors.
Great to be back on. And yeah, this will be a good episode. Thanks for putting this together and having me on here.
A little bit of a different idea. You and I have talked so much, and we'll get into this in some of the answers, but just to give people some context, we've talked so much about how we can constantly, like every month or so, kind of adjust and adapt the story behind this investment opportunity and share the information, right? So the whole process is just like, how can we share the information in ways that makes it easier to understand or more consumable or more clear? And so not that long ago, you came up with this idea like, hey, what if we just did something like this in private for people? It not only gives you who are listening to this, if you haven't become a regular listener or subscriber to the Entrepreneurial Thinkers show, I hope you do. If you don't listen to our stoppage time shows on Friday, I hope you do. But this gives you kind of a little teaser of the mechanics of what we do with the show on a regular basis, weekly, in fact, for over 127 episodes as of the ones that we just recorded. So we're already filled up through like the middle of the end of August with upcoming shows. But today we're going to flip it around. And we've got a handful of questions that are hopefully going to illuminate things that you might be curious about why we're doing this, kind of the how it works, and then just making sure that we make it painfully obvious where you can find more answers to your questions, aside from obviously talking to myself, or if you ever got to the level of curiosity that you felt you needed to talk to someone else who is invested in us, you could talk to Will, because that, again, is why Will is here today. Will is our lead investor. He is the first person who saw the vision that I have, shared in the energy of what was possible, and literally put his money where his mouth was, and has helped us even pursue this possibility. So Will, thanks for not only helping me do this today, but obviously thanks for making the first bet. And regardless of how long or short it takes us to get to where we're going, I've been grateful to have you stand behind my vision.
Yeah. And Rob, likewise, it's, I think we connected on Twitter, like everybody did here in LA during COVID. And I've really appreciated the friendship and kind of the relationship that we've built over the past couple of years here. And so not only am I really excited about what you're building and what your vision of the future is for your company and kind of your media empire here, but also I just think it's a good opportunity, which is why I put my money where my mouth was, and why I'm kind of pushing this along and helping kind of structure this, because I think there's a lot of possibility here and a lot of potential, and it's just really exciting. And I know you've got a great skill set here, and you've got the grit, hustle, ambition, everything you can name that makes a good entrepreneur, you've got it. And so I just want to see this succeed. So I appreciate that. Let's dive in, and I'll basically just ask the questions and give you a chance to talk about what it is you're building. And then together we can kind of explore what that means for a potential investor or someone interested in being part of that journey.
Yep. No, love it. Go for it.
So let's just start with the overarching question here of why start the Storytellers company, and what is the Storytellers company?
Great question. So I'll break it in those two parts. The why is actually, it's funny, over time, the why has become even simpler for me to define than it was as I thought about this about a year ago. So it was about a year ago last summer that I was going through kind of some transition in my own life and in my own professional life. And I was asking myself a bunch of questions about life and what I wanted to do and where I wanted to go. But as we fast forward to this summer, 2024, the answer is really clear. Like I just desperately believe and have now accumulated enough evidence to support the idea that there's just not enough positive human storytelling in our entrepreneurial or business content landscape. And that's at both a local level. So here, as we sit here, both of us on different parts of Los Angeles, which is a massive, massive market opportunity in and of itself, and obviously is the home of storytelling in the grandest sense of the word. But for me, it's in the global sense, right? So you know my history. You know that I spent most of the last 10 years from 2015 onward immersed in the Latin American entrepreneurial economy and came to appreciate the diversity of stories that exist about entrepreneurship and the business economy of life outside of the US. And then when I came back here and moved back home right at the beginning of the pandemic, and have now been here solidly in Los Angeles and more immersed in the kind of the US entrepreneurial economy, it just reinforced what I had seen there, right? And so I think maybe now the vision of last summer became so clear to me because I was like, oh, wait a minute. It wasn't just that we don't tell stories of the entrepreneurial economies and entrepreneurs outside of the US very effectively or very often. It was that we don't tell stories very effectively or very often about entrepreneurs in the US outside of those 3, 4, 6, 8, 10 same people that we lionize and that we hyper focus everything on, right? And everybody knows who those people are, so much so that I don't even have to say it, right? If you're listening to this story today, you know who those people are that we all talk about and hyper focus on. And to me, that's just not representative of the entrepreneurial journey. And so I think what really happened, if I'm being totally honest about it, is I probably thought this for a few years before I made this decision last summer. And I think I quietly just suspected or hoped maybe, or thought someone else would do it. And that someday like that would solve my problem with the world. And I'd be like, oh, great, they're doing it. Like they're doing what I should have done, but it's okay, they're doing it. And I think I realized that no one else was going to do it. And so rather than wait around and say, listen to people like you, friends, mentees, fellow mentors, other investors, entrepreneurs, community leaders in different entrepreneurial economies constantly tell me, oh my God, Rob, like it'd be great if you did more of that. Oh my God, Rob, like your positive energy and the stories, the way you spin stories on social media is so encouraging and it's such the light of my day, or it's what keeps me motivated, right? Like I just kind of listened to all that, but I thought, well, that's great. That's very nice. Thank you. But someone else, some media company, some media personality will come along and they'll do a better job of this. And it just never happened. Right. And so eventually I got to a point where life met opportunity. And I said, let's make it happen ourselves. So that was the birth of the why. Then the more specific part is, literally creating it, the company, creating the platform, calling it the Storytellers Company. We modeled the literal naming of it kind of after the Walt Disney Company, which is a great inspiration for a whole bunch of different reasons. But the main reason being Walt Disney began with literally, 2 characters that then grew to become what we know it is today, was an inspiration, has always been an inspiration for me, but was an inspiration in this particular line of thinking because I thought, like, we have an opportunity across multiple mediums to tell stories. We have an opportunity across multiple media to connect with communities. We have an opportunity to have these stories and these multiple medias kind of cross-pollinate one another, right? In very, very natural ways that can be both lucrative for us as a business as well as great for creating and connecting with community, right? And so it was obvious to me that there was like a pattern that was very similar. For those that look at our WeFunder link, we'll talk about that in a little bit. There's actually like some literal visual descriptions of these things and kind of how similar it is to the Disney model. We're not proposing that we're going to become the Walt Disney Company, but we're going to become our best version of that, focused on these entrepreneurial stories that are available to us to be told inside of kind of the worlds that we live in. So that was the naming behind it. It's an ode to us as storytellers, but it's also an ode to the fact that, like, when I interview you on a show, for example, or any of our guests, right, we're helping them to tell their stories, right? And that's it. That's maybe unique, right? Is we're not just interviewing people just as like a commodity in a transactional kind of way. Like our mission is that when you finish an episode of a podcast with us or a future television show with us, or if you participate in a book project or you're a panelist at a live event that we do in your entrepreneurial community locally, that you walk away feeling like, wow, like that was thank you for that, Rob. Like, thank you for having me on your show or helping me to tell my story better. I've now got this confidence and this content that I can use. So it's a bit of a reflection of us, the storytellers, and our responsibility, but it's also a reflection of the people that we're trying to help tell their stories better.
Yeah. And you're also growing a community from what I've seen and what I've experienced. So it is a media company, but there's a community company to it as well.
100%.
And even the labeling of the guests that come on your podcast as alumni, to me, I feel that, I've gone through your podcast before, and there's been guests that I've said, I would like to connect with that person.
Right.
And we made those connections. And so there really is a community element that you're building here, which I think is powerful and speaks to that flywheel that you mentioned. Maybe people have seen the Disney kind of flywheel with all the arrows and everything pointing from the parks to the content to the audio and everything. You've thought about that pretty deeply. What are some of the products of the company that you're starting with? And maybe give us a high-level roadmap of how you see yourself building the company and how that flywheel can really start spinning as you have more content and a broader audience and a broader alumni base.
Great question. So there's the superficial, like really big picture answer, which is obvious, right? It's almost limitless, right? but let's come back to the more realistic, like world that I live on a daily basis, right? Which is, I like to say one of the things is, from our own points of view, you and I, our team at Storytellers Company, but also from the initial investors, from the community standpoint, is like we're not starting out from scratch, right? So the one of the differences of many is that this isn't just an idea that I had last summer, and I'm asking everybody else to bear the risk to help me prove out something that may or may not be viable, right? The fundamental truth is product number one, as we talk about it internally, is our podcast. And although I may be humble and say like we're a small podcast and we're still growing our audience and we're still figuring out, all that is true, the world would tell you that the fact that we've made it to recording episode number 127 and that we're 4 years into this, the world would tell you that we have literally put ourselves into the top half of 1% of podcasters in the world. And I know that sounds silly, right, to people who maybe either never listen to podcasts or who do listen to podcasts, but they only listen to those that are like the hugely recognizable ones. But the factual truth of the industry is that by persisting beyond episode number 10, which is about where 80% of podcasters fall out, or beyond episode number 50, which is where another huge chunk of podcasters fall out, or beyond, this is like, we're in Nirvana land now to get beyond episode number 100. The fact is that as crazy as it sounds, yeah, like Huberman and Joe Rogan and some podcasters that I don't even like or respect, and I are now in the same category. Yes, we're way down here at the bottom of that half a percentile, but we're in that for having done the work. So product number one in our world is the podcast, right? Entrepreneurial Thinkers, which has, it's existed in a different form and with a different name all the way back to the summer of 2020. We have now gotten into a rhythm in the last probably 2 years of producing a show on a weekly basis. We've transitioned the show, adapted the show, evolved, rebranded ourselves as we headed into 2024 to align with this, but also to just kind of align to a changing world from what the show was in its original intention. But none of the core of how we do what we do and how the who that does the how is a couple of young, really talented Mexicanos that have worked for me part-time in Mexico and now in Portugal since way back in the beginning in our consulting business. And they've transitioned over to this. Deanna Bernal is our show producer, and she is young, but incredibly gifted and talented at producing the show that people listen to. And she's helped me to constantly evolve, to constantly reinvent, to reposition the show. So podcast Entrepreneurial Thinkers is product number one. This spring, we added a second podcast to that mix. It's called Stoppage Time. It drops every Friday. It's a different way to present me and connect with our audience, right? It's me literally doing a weekly roundup of my thoughts on the issues and opportunities and challenges of the day, so to speak. But we launched that because it was like, okay, let's start to branch into other opportunities, right? Now, beyond that, we already have a roadmap that is very specific, right? So the roadmap from here goes podcast 1, podcast 2, how do we continue to grow those? How do we continue to technically change them so that they can be more easily discovered, more easily found by audiences beyond the scope of our initial community? But then we've got already on the books pun intended there, right? So we have a book project that has been literally tabled to me that does involve a partnership that requires some capital expenditure on our part. And so that's why we haven't articulated that yet. But we have a book project with the most reputable publishing agency, literary agency in Mexico City, where I obviously have a deep network of relationships and a long history. And they're very eager to work with me on writing, I'll say, the first book. If you would have talked to me 6 to 9, 12 months ago, I would have said to write a book. And I've now come to realize that once we figure out and crack the seal of writing the first book, that will inevitably lead to a long string of books, right? Because if we can figure out how to do it, just like we figured out how to do the podcast, we can figure out how to create another opportunity for people to connect with and me to connect with people. Beyond that, though, then we have 2 other projects that are already kind of in discussion at various levels. One is we have a television opportunity that's been presented to us by some people here in the industry who are much more knowledgeable about these things than you and I are. And they've pitched me, so to speak, on this idea that we could self-produce a pilot episode around this very particular concept of a television show here in Southern California that was wildly successful in a prior era. And since, as my daughter would tell us, since Hollywood apparently loves to make sequels and remakes, I just watched the Eddie Murphy film the other day. I was like, oh my God, he's still doing this, right? But that we have an opportunity to pursue that. And then the one that I think actually winds up being the fourth product, and really I think those next 3, the books, the television projects, and this next one that I'll talk about, I kind of become interchangeable over time, is this idea of live events. Right. And we're already in discussion with some friends about being prospective sponsors to do a pilot version of, let's call it, a live event in Mexico City. And the concept around that is really, let's take the podcast on the road. Right. Mm-hmm. It's a very popular, if you're a podcast listener, it's a very popular podcasting concept right now to bring your podcast show to record locally. We've obviously got, as you referenced before, the alumni network of previous guests, now 127 and constantly growing. And those people are pocketed all over the world. And so we have a concentration of those types of guests across a myriad of different topics in Mexico City. And so our thought process and our desire is that by the end of this year, by Q4 of 2024, that we put ourselves in a position to, at the very least, do like an MVP pilot version of that, commercialize the book sales, commercialize the television project through distribution. And that becomes kind of the foundation basis of that, Disney map where it all starts to tie together. You can imagine a world, quickly to add to this answer, you can imagine a world in which now the exposure that happens via the television show is very naturally feeding back to the podcast and vice versa. Mm-hmm. You can imagine a world in which the sales of books, right, or the speaking opportunities or the panel opportunities, the public PR opportunities that come as a result of having written the book now suddenly drive audience to, like, well, I read the book, I want to listen to them on the podcast, or I listen to them on the podcast all the time, I want to go read that book, right? And then, oh, wait a minute, now you're talking about this road show is like coming to my city, right? So now all of a sudden we're going to do an event here in Los Angeles, our home city, or we're going to go to Mexico City and we're going to talk with the best and brightest entrepreneurial thinkers of your city, mm-hmm. right? And we're going to obviously be able to talk about the book that's out there, and we're going to be able to teach, and we're going to be able to answer long-term the limitless question. Kind of, we're going to be able to explore the production of other stories in different submarkets, right, across these medium, which we will now have planted our seeds in. Mm-hmm. So as we stand today, the thing I could say assuredly is we're good at doing podcasts, and we continually pursue growing the audience. What I will say assuredly in 6 months to a year will be that, oh wow, we know how to write a book and market it and produce it, and we know how to surround ourselves with the right talented people to produce a capable, like, award-winning television show, and we know how to tell stories in live events. Like that is the foundation. And then it does truly become limitless without sounding kind of Pollyannish about it.
Yeah. So the core of it is telling stories, and it is growing audience that is listening to those stories in different formats or through different channels. Talk a little bit about the book and how that can act as a catalyst for speaking engagements and kind of elevating you as an expert. You told me this story a couple different times where you've seen people take this, very similar book deal, get it written and published, and it really elevates you as a published author in the eyes of other sponsors or anyone else looking to throw an event, which leads to speaking engagements for you or other media type opportunities. So just talk a little bit about that and then kind of bring it back to tying it in on everything and how everything generates profit. At the end of the day, we're exploring this as an investment opportunity. Yep. So let's bring it all back to how that generates revenue, which then goes to the company, which then benefits the investors, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, no, it's a great kind of, it's like the catalyst question, right? So I'll answer it humbly this way. First things first, I don't know what I don't know. And so I did, and as we began this project, I knew what we knew, right? As we already discussed, we knew how to do the podcast. I literally did not understand the economics of, or how the industry of writing a book worked, other than having been a consumer of books, maybe like people that will be listening and watching this, right? And so I did what I always do in business, which is I reached out to people that I knew that were really good at that thing. And I said, would you mind please explaining to me that thing? And I was very fortunate, not surprised, I guess, to find out how many people in my long universe, like going back to the beginning of my career at age 19, 37 years ago, have become successful authors. And then bringing it all the way up even to the current, which is the genesis of the relationship that led to the referral to the agency that has offered us this contract opportunity to write the first book. That came through a former alumnus of our show, a cross-border entrepreneur from Mexico, northern Mexico, and El Paso, Texas, who himself worked with this agency to write his first book. And then he explained to me kind of both the literal economics and then the process of how he went from being someone who had no podcast, had no book, had never written a book, hadn't even really given a public speech ever before in his life, from that to working with this agency to craft and pull out of him the story that was the first book. And then how he did it with the intention of, and it was funny to hear, but how he did it with the intention of, he said, trying to become more like me. And I laughed and thought to myself, like, Jose, you're a wildly successful businessman who runs a couple $1 million a year, B2B business. Like, what do you, and he's like, no, I wanted to become more of like a brand, and I wanted to become more of a storyteller. And I wanted that to become a way that I could supplement my income outside of my traditional business. And frankly, eventually grow to do more of that, because I love doing more of that. And then I could always hire someone to operate my day-to-day business. And so he explained to me that. A couple of very successful author friends explained to me that. And the biggest takeaway that I'll share here, which I think answers the root of the question, is I never understood that the writing of the book, is essentially the great marketing hook in modern day media.
Yeah, I didn't know that either until you told me that.
And then once you unpack it a few times with people, you're like, oh, that makes total sense, right? And so when I say that, what I mean is it's the business card. It is the calling card. It is the thing that people that are on the panels, and it's because they wrote a book or they were the investor that sponsored the panel, right? I mean, like, so you're like, oh, okay. So literally it has become understood that the mechanics of the economics of writing a book is such that you don't make a ton of money on your first book, because why would you? Because no one knows you. Right. Mm-hmm. So I'm not President Obama. I'm not Oprah. Right. No one's coming along and saying, like, here's $20 million to write a book because we know we're going to be able to sell enough of it to make $50 million. Right. That's the fantasy book world that we hear about as consumers. But the truth is that there are talented people in that industry who say to themselves, like, oh, you would make an amazing author, and you have a very particular way that you can communicate this. And we know how to get that into the market. Right. And then what that'll do is then that creates, as you said, that creates it's kind of like an entry door that opens to another series of opportunities to both expose and increase the level of exposure for the brand, right, that is me and our related companies, but also to monetize, like to commercialize. Right. And at the end of the day, like you said, let's be clear about this. This is business. Like I am doing this, yes, because I love this stuff. And I am doing this, yes, because I have a passion for it and I'm good at it. But I am also doing this because I made a very specific life decision in this last 12 months that said, this is the way I want to spend the rest of my life. This is what I want to do to make a living, right? And so this is, to tie it back, as you say, like, this is very much my new business. And it took me a good 6 or 8 months to just even get used to saying that, yep. Right? Just to tell people, like, this is my business. right? And I constantly, as we're reaching out to friends and prospective investors, I'm constantly telling you all that are listening, like, no, this is my business. Like I'm the consulting business that you knew that I ran very, very passionately for 8-9 years in Latin America, like is no more. Like I do a little bit of this, a little bit of that in this transition, right? But the focus is this is our business. And so how do we commercialize the podcast, right? How do we commercialize and leverage a book to create other revenue opportunities? How do you commercialize and distribute television to create revenue? How do you commercialize and underwrite events to have them be profitable, to have them make money? And the good news that I always like to say to folks is all of these things are known things, right? So we're not venturing off into something that no one understands how to do. We're simply inserting me and my 37 years of professional experience and my now 56 years as of my birthday years of life experience. We're inserting me, who's used storytelling as a tool in my core businesses to generate revenue and to close deals and to grow companies and to open markets. We're just taking that and we're inserting it into a world that is already monetized, that already has very stable commercial models, and that already has very clear paths to, like, if you do this, then this will become opportunity for you. And then that is monetizable in this way. And here's what you could expect to make it doing that the first time. And here's what you do the second time. Here's how it happens the third time. And that is both exciting and confidence building for me. Because arguably in my prior few businesses, either my own creations or leading companies for others as investors, it's always been like a literal new market and a new idea. And then how do we figure out a model behind it? And how do you make money at it? And so this one, it's just been a matter of learning, right? Of acquiescing, surrounding ourselves with really, really smart people, and then saying like, okay, how does this create that? And to the last part of the question that you asked, right? So for prospective investors who come in and, as I say, share in our success, the really unique thing, we'll talk more about this when we get to it, but the really unique thing about this relationship that we're proposing is I'm not positing to you, come and invest a whole bunch of money and then hope someday that like we get acquired by Walt Disney, right? Or hope someday that we go, this is almost embarrassing to say because I don't think anybody does it anymore, goes public, right? Like that's the only way that you monetize in these traditional like equity investments, they would call that, right? Or now there's this fancy thing with guys like Will where they have secondary offerings where you can take money off the table. But like the reality is like you're basically waiting for some mythical day in the future when said company that you've invested in has become so big that it becomes unstoppable and therefore has to get invested or acquired by someone else. And then you get to cash out. In this case, we're not doing that. Like we're literally like, we talk about figuring out how to create revenue and commercialize each of these different products and then how to have them kind of feed each other. Because once we get the revenue stream going with these, which is the underlying thesis of spending these first 2 years to really focus on that. Once we get these going, that spigot stays on as long as I stay alive and interested in doing this, which is, I've already said to you, this is the plan for the rest of my days. So, that's the encouraging part is like, we will create revenue from all of these because that's what people who are in these spaces at the levels that we aspire to be at, that's what they do. They create revenue from these. And then the model is such that we will share that revenue on an ongoing, consistent basis to all of our investors to the point where the investors are going to get their money back and then have the opportunity to share in the upside that we create as far as new revenues over a long period of time. That's why I said in the intro, like, you're really signing up to be on a journey with me for the next 10 plus years, because that's what this is all about. We have in our industry, this lifestyle company versus like a growth company. And this is a growth company that actually suits and creates a lifestyle for me and the people that will work with us. And so I think we're tapping into kind of a more modern reality rather than kind of the old fixed arguments that we used to have. Yeah, no, hopefully that answers the question.
It does. And it kind of leads into, the reason that I wrote the first check and that we've been talking and why I find this interesting is kind of multifold. So one, the media business has been around forever. We're not inventing some new technology or anything like that. Podcasting, writing a book, speaking engagements, live events, television, like this has been around for a long time. And you've done a really good job of building your network over the past few decades in multiple places around the world, specifically in the entrepreneurial landscape. And that entrepreneurial thinking theme is, I believe, unexplored. Like you said, you've got the people that get put up on a pedestal and lionized, but more and more the entrepreneurial thinking, it's going to be everybody. A lot of traditional kind of white collar jobs are going away. More people are becoming their own business, their own entrepreneur, and thinking entrepreneurially, whether that's starting a YouTube channel or, selling some kind of a branded merchandise, something like that. Or starting a Substack even. Like, people are just becoming their own business and creating, content. And I think what you're trying to do is tell those stories, bring some human elements to the stories around those people, which human interest stories, telling those stories, like, again, something else that's been around forever. People want to hear good stories and they want to follow people, and they'll pay money for it.
Yep.
And so what you're doing, and what was interesting to me, was exploring multiple different channels to tell those stories, whether that's the book or the TV show. And I know that you have some good contacts there in the TV world. I also know you have the book deal, and I've kind of seen how that can translate into speaking engagements as well. And all of that is revenue generating. All of that is a flywheel that kind of feeds on each other. Now, the way we structured this investment opportunity was not just into the company, right? And this is mostly because of this is how I do deals. Is I look at early things that are often risky just because they're early. They're unproven. It's like you're investing in a startup, it's going to be risky. Where I kind of trained as an investor was a little bit more in the private equity family office world. And so what I've been doing for the past 5 years of my career is trying to invest in risky things in a less risky way. And the tagline of the way that I've been doing that is by investing in the person. And so what does that actually mean? If you're angel investing or investing in a company, you're writing a check to the company, and in return, you're getting equity in that company. That company is then trying to grow and generate revenue and potentially exit, or potentially distribute money back to your investors. If that company doesn't grow and shuts down, your investment goes to zero. That company shuts down. What we've done is change it a little bit and say, okay, maybe this early stage this company has some risks because it's unproven and it's early. But what we're doing is really structuring the investment in Rob Ryan and Rob Ryan's career, all encompassing of all of his activities. And that's what the investment is. And so the investors are writing a check, and yes, we've structured it as a business, but that business is really the holding company of Rob Ryan's career output going forward.
Yeah. So when we monetize, again, we monetize me writing a book and the sales of that book, right? We monetize this podcast, which we're in the beginning throes of being able to do that now. We monetize television show, and again, eventually it becomes like, if you've made a television show, then we pursue making additional television shows, right? We monetize producing these live events in a way that they're profitable, and that is revenue or income, right? And the thesis that underlies everything you were just describing is that then it is shared, right? Mm-hmm. And that answers kind of the whole, like, why are we doing this the way we're doing it question, right? Like, why did we choose to do this in a crowdfunding manner? Not to steal one of your questions that I know you wanted to ask me, but that, like, I will, right? Because that is really important, because you and I talked a lot about last winter doing it a different way, right? And kind of maybe even a more traditional way, right? And there was an allure to that to me. But I'll also, to those that know us well enough to be listening to this link, they'll know that I also, when I'm uncomfortable with something, I'm uncomfortable with something, and it gnaws at me until I change it. And so ultimately I was uncomfortable with that. I didn't say that. It wasn't your fault. It wasn't my fault. It was a choice we made. And then we adjusted and adapted as a good entrepreneur should. And the truth is, we're creating this, and we've created the content that's on our WeFunder link and the page there. And we've told the story in innumerable phone conversations that I've had, or text messages or emails. And we're just trying to constantly tell the story, because I know this is a winner. And I know this will create the revenues that we've talked about, and those revenues will be shared. And I want the people that share in these things to be the alumni of our show. I want the people that share in these things to be future alumni of our shows. I want the people that share in these things to be the people that are the stories, the anecdotal stories that I'll share in the books. I want the people to be like sharing this, that are literally the backbone of, as you say, the community, which is a word I've had to get used to applying to myself and to this, but it is absolutely what we have. And so the allure of the way that we're doing it, it's never easy raising money, period. Hey, everybody knows that. But the allure of doing it this way is that the resulting benefactors, the beneficiaries, I should say, of everything that we do, of all this work that I will do my career for the remaining years of life that I have, will be people that should share in this, like other entrepreneurial thinkers, right? Other creative people, other people who seek a little bit of inspiration or information or education or content from the way that they consume information that's out there. So yeah, that's why I'm so excited about the way that we're doing it, the way we're doing it.
Why raise money at all? What is your use of those proceeds?
Great question. So one, we'll get it out of the way. Anybody that's a friend on here knows I'm not a rich guy, so I had to raise money to stand this up. Two is you presented to me kind of the model of the way that this could be done in a way that I had never considered before. It wasn't something I was familiar with. I had raised traditional capital, let's call it that, traditional equity capital, a handful of different times in my career. I've never been a huge fan of it per se, but I've done it to fuel the underlying opportunity and growth opportunities of the businesses that I've been involved in leading. And this is no different, right? So the difference here would be that what we're doing is we're raising a very finite amount of capital from ideally within this community. And that amount of capital has a very specific purpose to it, which is fundamentally to underwrite the ability to stand up these first 4 or 5 projects that we've talked about, which are sitting there waiting to be executed upon, to solidify and stabilize and stand up the team that I already have in place, that I already pay, that have come with us forward from the consulting world, but add a piece or two to that team when and where need be, so that we can grow the products that we're talking about. And then in part and parcel with that, to stabilize and focus me, right? And that is the underlying thing, is you are investing in not just my ability to do this, but you're investing in my ability to do this in a singular way that enables me to stay focused in on this set of projects and opportunities in front of us for a very finite period of time, for 24 months, 2 years, in which we already anticipate, as is shared in the WeFunder material, we already anticipate early revenues that will begin to come in, early income that will begin to come in from these projects as we commercialize the ones that are more established, the podcasts, or as we begin to commercialize the books, or as we begin to pilot with the events. And then there's space to grow to allow the longer term projects that are a bit more complex, such as television opportunities, to unfold, right? Or even to get into this phase of a second book. So this money is enabling that. It's enabling us to stabilize. It's enabling us to focus where commercialization growth can happen. It's really just enabling us to focus on just building this, as I say, kind of being able to go into the world and say, like, this is my business.
And there again, we'll share the WeFunder link as part of this, but lots of information on that page, right? And maybe talk about how easy it is for an investor, if they do want to just hit the WeFunder and be a part of this journey and invest.
Yeah.
Talk about that a little bit.
No, happy to. It's actually, I think it's freaking awesome. And I'm not saying that because it's me doing this. Like, I literally had never been exposed. I had, similarly to what we described about the media projects, I had never understood the platform or the approach to crowdfunding. I had been aware of it, like I'm aware of most things in life, but I had never really taken the time to understand it. And what you have shown me and what we have created, you and your team at Inspire have partnered with WeFunder, and what the people behind WeFunder have shown us, and how we've set this up to share this information with you, the prospective investors, is fascinatingly easy. I mean, it is incredible. Like, it's still hard, but it's almost so simple that it feels like it's less hard, right? But it is incredibly easy for you all to participate. And I'll just give you one example of someone who texted me back and said, "Hey, okay, I'm going to invest." Like, all right, awesome, right? Like, can I invest this amount? I was sure you could invest $300,000 and you would eventually own 10% of everything that we do over time, or you could invest $100. And you'll own that fractional piece of that, what we create over time, and get your money back. I was like, whichever you like. And she was like, okay, well, I'd like to invest this much. I was like, great. And she's literally screenshotting me the WeFunder page that she's on, as she's hit our link, which we'll include with this when we send the link to this video along. There's a link for us for our offering for the story of Storytellers Company at WeFunder in my name, et cetera. You'll see the login. And it's this beautiful, simple, essentially web page, right? That just takes you from like, hi, this is what this is all about. And we have another video there, which is a video that tells you a little bit more of my personal story, a little bit more of my personal motivation, the whys behind this. But then literally the rest of it is just a beautifully written, if I do say so ourselves, like articulation of all of the detailed things that you would want to know, all the questions that you may have about how does it work? How do I get my money back? How does an investment like this work? How does a revenue share investment where I've never done this before? Like all of that is answered in this document that you will have access to, and in supplemental information, which is linked to the document, which you can click through and read more if you want to do that. But at the most simple, basic level, you could be like this investor, this friend of mine, who literally screenshotted me like, okay, I'm inside the WeFunder. I see the amounts. I'd like to invest this amount. What do I do? And I was like, I think you just enter that amount, right? And she entered that amount, and I'll give you an example, a funny story. She entered it incorrectly. And then literally I got the confirmation like 30 seconds later, she got the confirmation, and I texted her back and said like, hey, I think you meant to do this. And I think you did this. And she's like, oh my God, oh my God, this probably screwed everything up. I was like, I don't think it did. I was like, why don't you just go back, log back into your little account that you set up, right? And so she went back in, she entered her thing, and she changed the investment amount and essentially corrected it to what she meant to type, right?
It's super easy.
I mean, it is literally, so like the logistics of it, you get the link, you read the story, you understand that. Let's just assume between this beautiful podcast and all the information in the WeFunder, you don't have any other questions for some reason. You literally are asked by WeFunder to set up an account, which is no different than you or I logging into, the new portal because we moved into a new neighborhood or moved into a new apartment building or got a new bank account. And they said, set up your account online. So it's that simple. You're putting in an email address, you're setting up a password. Now you have an account with WeFunder. And that then asks you, and it presents to you all the investment options. You literally, it's like a screen, like entering in an amount you would when you would enter it in a bank, and you enter in your $1,000, $2,000, $500, $100. You could enter in any amount that is within the range of what we're trying to raise. And if you go above a certain amount, it'll ask you, like it throws you another page, which is just a page for you to click, some answers. If you're under a certain amount, it's a smaller page with fewer questions. And it's literally just this couple of minute process. I'm not exaggerating. And then what you have done is you have essentially, in this early phase, this private phase that we're sharing this kind of information with you, you have essentially pledged that investment amount. You've committed that is your intention to invest. And then once we do our job, which is to raise above a certain threshold, which in this case is $50,000 US, then that literally calls in your investment. And all of this is explained right there on the page, on your confirmation. You get an email confirmation. And ironically, now we've learned, like if you later decided you wanted to invest more because you were so excited about how easy it was and the whole opportunity, you could go back into your account, you could invest more. So, I mean, it literally, I've been blown away, and the support we've gotten, and therefore the support that you would get as a prospective investor, if you had a question or a technical difficulty, the support we've gotten from the WeFunder people is incredible. And I want to speak to one last bit of it, and then you can explain kind of your part of it. Is one of the things that was really important to me, if we were going to do it this way and raise money from you all, was that it be like legitimately administered. Because I am the first person in my entrepreneurial journey to admit that I am not the chief administrative officer of anything that I do. And so to me, it was critical that it like not just be legitimate, but that it be administered in such a way that it was secure, that it was safe, that it was legal, that all the legal paperwork that is required gets done, that all of the filings that get done, that what I am asking you to come along and share in this journey with me, the back end of it, let's just say the administrative process end of it, would be handled flawlessly by third-party professionals not named me, right? And not associated with me. That was very, very important to me. And the benefit was what you and your team have done outside of Chisos. We talked about the platform company that you're building called Inspire. Mm-hmm. And Inspire, as the administrator of this investment, this way, and then your future distributions and revenue sharing that we talked about, your future essentially repayments of your investment that you've earned, plus your upside. Like all of that is processed through Inspire. And then WeFunder comes along and is the front end to get you into this. So, I mean, it's this perfect marriage in my mind as an entrepreneur to say, these are things that I am not good at, that I know that there are people who are good at them. Let's partner with those people so that the people that I invite into this process on my journey as investors are treated like A class the way that they should be, and that they don't have any legal, financial, accounting worries or concerns. We've eliminated that. We've de-risked that for you. So if you want to talk a little bit more about Inspire, WeFunder and Inspire relationship, go for it. But like, to me, that was why it was so important to me.
Yeah, I'll just say Inspire has facilitated a few $1 million in investments in these types of structures. Over 70 deals have been done. So we have this down, and this structure works. We are partnering with WeFunder to facilitate this as a Reg CF crowdfund. What that means is anybody, anywhere can invest. You don't have to be accredited, which means you meet certain wealth thresholds. Anybody can invest. Lowest investment amount, I believe, is $100.
I think it's $100. Yeah, it's $100. Yeah.
Yeah.
US.
And
sorry.
There's perks for investing more, and so it's really up to you, and it's really easy. But at the end of the day, you're investing in Rob's career output and Rob's sole focus being the Storytellers company, and taking his experience and his community and his relationships and turning that into content across multiple channels that monetize and feed off of each other. And more importantly, tell good stories, bring the human element to that entrepreneurial ecosystem. So I guess just to wrap up, maybe end with the big vision. Like, over the next 10 years, what does this business look like? Maybe get people really excited to see that vision and join in.
You know what? It's funny because we know each other really well. And I used to tease you when we were starting this. I would say, like, you're going to get to know the other side of me. You're going to get to know the operator side of me, which really focuses on the what's going on tomorrow. So thank you for asking that kind of setup question at the end here, because I don't nearly share enough kind of the big crazy vision. And the beauty of the big crazy vision is that, as I said, and it's a fun new pathway for me in my professional life, because the prior 4 companies that I've either started or been a part of starting, for others, like, we're always proving unproven markets, right? And so the fun of this is I envision a world in which we've created a podcast network, right? And I can tell you, we've already had 2 former alumnus of the show, and then another third-party friend who have approached us and said, like, hey, could you help us get a podcast going? Like, we want to do a podcast for this niche market. We want to do a podcast in this part of the market in the US. We want to do a podcast about this. And so I envision us establishing a podcasting network, which then obviously creates synergies for our sponsor partners and creates more content, more exposure for our sponsors and our founding sponsors and our advertising partners in the future. So I envision that. I've already tipped you. I clearly envision me writing books the rest of my life. I will tease you, because you're on this link listening, right? That one of the concepts around the initial book, I'm not saying this is what the first book will be for sure, but one of the concepts is the most obvious concept in my life, which is this idea around stop networking, start building relationships, right? And if that wasn't ever a title to fly off a business bookshelf, I've never known one, right? But it's also, it's my life's work, is building relationships, right? So the idea that we will create books, and books will become a consistent mechanism as part of the storytelling machine, is obvious. I believe, and this is the ambitious part of me, but I believe once we figure out television in the current landscape of television and digital content, which can run across a myriad of traditional broadcasting market tool platforms, as well as like new digital things like YouTube and the like. Once we figure that out with the help of the really talented people in the industry that we were surrounding ourselves with, we'll create television content every year for the rest of my life. And we'll create television content in different markets. I'm very particularly inspired by the Netflix vision of how Netflix is creating content outside the US. And I've watched some stories and some documentaries on this, and I know some people who've been inside that beast. And so to me, there's a very natural niche opportunity that is a massive niche. Again, entrepreneurial economy, you and I refer to it, but the truth is that's just business, right? And so when you're talking like lifestyle, self-help, nonfiction, fiction, business, right? I mean, it's one of those categories. So to me, I suspect strongly once we figure out television through the production of our first effort, like there will be an unlimited amount of television opportunities that we can create. And then live events just is the opportunity to take it on the road with people, right? So again, I don't suspect we'll create $1 billion, multi-billion dollar Disney World, like kind of thing. But I do suspect that this is a multi-million dollar business on an annualized basis that will not only obviously change my life, and change the lives of our prospective investors, but will create just unlimited stories that will be told about people, about humans that are pursuing the things in life that need pursuing, right? I mean, I talk about it in the thesis of Entrepreneurial Thinkers. It's that I want to talk to people across every sector and segment of society. You told the story earlier about the entrepreneurs that we talk to and the new age, different entrepreneurs, but I'll take it a step further. There's a very, very well-known politician in Los Angeles right now who has not come on the show yet, but is very intrigued and interested in coming on the show because I pitched to her the idea that the way that she is approaching city government in the city of Los Angeles and attacking the major issues and opportunities we have in our city right now is entrepreneurial in nature. And she agrees. Right. We've got a prospective guest that'll be coming up on a show in the next couple of months that is the CEO of the stock exchange in Mexico. And she is a young forward thinker, and she's thinking about what does Mexico need to look like 50 to 100 years from now. They want to tell those stories with us. Right. And I'm humbled and I'm grateful that they want to largely tell those stories with us because it's me. And it's my energy, and apparently channeling everything that my mom and dad ever taught me about life and about other humans and how to treat them and how to help them and how to amplify them. But we're channeling that through this, and the Storytellers company, as you said, it's the wrapper, it's the vessel through which we put all these things. But if we can get stood up, and that's the key right now, right, to come back to the present day, if we can get stood up, we can commercialize and expand the podcast and grow the audience. And the more we grow the audience, the better for the business. But also, guess what, man? I just want more people to be inspired. You're a guest alumnus of the show. And in my opinion, I don't care how many hundreds of people have listened to your episode over the last couple of years, more should have. Right. And so that's part of the mechanics of like getting this stood up, is that the stories that we're telling, I end every recording and I'm like, wow, I can't believe I got to have that conversation with that person. I want everybody in the world who's attached to these types of topics, like, to be able to see that person's story. And that's what we're talking about right now. You're going to help us come in as investors, as Will already has, and stand this up and focus it and get it out of the garage at a scaled up level over the next 2 years, so that we can then build and lean into the unlimited possibilities that come with it, that will turn this thing into a 6, 7, 8, 9 figure type of thing over the course of my life, because that's what's possible in these industries that already exist that we've just never played in before.
And you get to just be a part of the entire journey. Like you said, this is the start. There's a lot of opportunity here, a lot of upside, both monetarily, but also community-wise, as an early kind of fixture of that community and of that alumni base. You're only benefiting at a compounding rate as more and more people come into the ecosystem, 100%. More and more people listen to the content, and back to the flywheel concept. It just helps everything from relationships to the revenue.
Yeah. I mean, you can't, I don't think you can oversell it. I probably undersell it a lot. Right. But your reference to your own experience on the show, and then just again, extrapolate that out. So whether or not you're an investor today and you become a guest of the show at some point, or the shows, is almost secondary, right? Because as an investor, you become an alumnus of the community, right? So right now, the only way we create alumnus is by coming through the podcast, right? But by becoming an investor, you're becoming an alumnus of this community. And I'll give you one little quick anecdotal story that mirrors Will, but takes it to another level. There's a young woman, dynamic young woman, a leader inside the entrepreneurial and creative and African-American economies of New York City, Mika Lejean. And Mika was on an earlier episode, incredible woman, Mika hangs up from recording with me and she immediately calls me back and says, "Hey, do you have a minute?" I said, "Sure." She's like, "I would love to, I would really love to meet this person and this person that you mentioned while we were interviewing her." Right. And I was like, "Yeah, happy to do it. No problem." And then she was like, "Matter of fact, like, if you don't hold on, like, give me a weekend. I'm going to go back and I'm literally going to like binge listen to every episode that you've produced. And then I'm going to make notes because I have a strong suspicion that your alumni guest pool is my strategic partner pool that I need to be pursuing for our organization." And
Yep.
she legit did that. And then slowly but surely has built up like a dozen or so relationships strictly as a result of the fact that she was in this community. Investors who come into this community, again, ideally there probably aren't going to be 5,000 of you. There's going to be a few hundred of you, somewhere from 100 to 500 of you probably, and you're going to become that next tier of alumnus in this network, and that unlocks all kinds of possibilities. You're going to be able to say to me, "Hey, I live in Raleigh, Durham." I'm thinking of my friend Frank. Like, I live in Raleigh, Durham in the Research Triangle, dynamic entrepreneurial part of the U.S. economy, right? Like, would you think about coming here and doing a book signing, or would you think about coming here and hosting a live event? Or I'd love to have you come in and speak about that book that you wrote about relationships and not networking. I'd love to have you speak to our sales team at our company in Raleigh, Durham. Like, yes, right? And so then all of a sudden that's feeding on it, right? But then also maybe Frank says, "Oh my gosh, like I could really benefit from partnering with that." So yeah, I undersell it. But the truth is content is in the 21st century, in 2024 to 2050 world, which is what we're talking about here. Content is the mechanism through which you build community and you build real human relationships. And our unique twist on it is that we don't have to lionize the already supposedly wealthy, rich elitists. Like, we can literally tell the stories of everybody else that's actually making the world work and innovating and changing and growing to make this place a little bit better. As my mom used to say, that was the aspiration, to try and leave this place a little bit better than we found it, buddy. So that's my life's work.
I love it. Obviously, I'm excited. If anybody wants to chat with me as someone who's literally written a check and believes in this thing, put their money down. I'm easy to find. Twitter, LinkedIn. Rob can connect you with me if you want to chat. That company, Inspire.io. It's INSPIRR. Our website's undergoing a redo, so I think there's a landing page up right now. But that'll be part of the power and performance behind the actual investment.
Yep.
And then Rob, I think everyone knows where to find you, but like, what are your shout outs? Where should people go?
They all do know how to find me. And the email address now, and they can continue to email me at the old email address if they want, but the email address now all forwards through Rob Ryan at storytellerscompany.com. And then we do have also our initial landing page up for Storytellers Company. And you can find us on social media. You can find me on social media, of course, at I am Rob Ryan. But most of the people who will get this link, those of you who are receiving this, you know how to text me, you know how to DM me, you know how to WhatsApp me. And again, I'm reaching out to you. So if you haven't talked to me already, I'm going to be talking to you. But if you get this and anticipate you'd like to talk to me, just go ahead and reach out. And I'm here to answer the questions. If it's something for you, awesome. I'd love to have you along for the ride. If it's not a fit for you right now, that's totally okay. Doesn't change our friendship or the context of life. But we'd love to have you along, because this is going to be exactly what Will and I just spent this time describing, and you wouldn't have this sitting in your lap in your inbox if it wasn't for my belief that I want you to share in some of what you've encouraged and supported me over the course of my career. So,
and the WeFunder link will be in the show notes.
Yep.
And forwarded and everything, and that's probably the most important. Go to that link. There's a lot of information there.
Yep.
And that is where you can pledge your investment to the Storytellers Company and to the investment in Rob Ryan.
Awesome. Thanks, brother.
Thank you.
I like being the guest every once in a while. This is fun. Thanks, everybody. Well, I hope you enjoyed that episode as much as I did recording it. As always, we thank you so much for listening and watching. Today's show was recorded here in Los Angeles and produced by the incomparable Deanna Bernal in Mexico City. You know, we can only grow this show by you listening and sharing the show with friends. So please find, like, follow, subscribe, and share our audio-only show on Spotify, Apple, or via any other popular podcasting platforms, as well as find the video version of our show now available on our YouTube channel over at Entrepreneurial Thinkers. And of course, you can follow along on our various social media platforms for fun and informative clips and content at Entrepreneurial Thinkers, wherever you can find us. And if you'd like to connect with me, you can find me at I Am Rob Ryan on just about any social media platform. Gracias, thank you, and have an awesome day.